Years ago, Orville was crafting and sculpting an instrument, and little could he imagine, or maybe he did, that he would set the tone literally for the next 128 years and beyond for fretted instruments.
What makes a Gibson different than other acoustics is really a part of American music history. And what I mean by that is that if you could look at every Gibson acoustic built from Orville's first shop in 1894 throughout time, it would look like Darwin's theory of evolution. And in other words, it kept changing. And why did it do that? Because Gibson was an idea. Gibson was not just an instrument design. It was not just one instrument. It was an idea of building an instrument that performed.
Everything that we do on all of our instruments, any changes we make, when we're looking at developing new concepts, everything has to be in service to sound, which is one of the most incredible lessons that Orville left us.
We're a very traditional company, so we utilize bracing patterns that have been established over decades and decades of building the specific models. There's different placements of braces dependent on the body size, the body shape, the contour of the body. And even within, say, a slope-shouldered dreadnought like a 45, we use several different bracing patterns.
The top bracing, that's more for the sound. The back bracing is very important for the stability of the whole instrument. Aesthetically got to be perfect because people look into the sound hole and they want to see it as if the braces grew there. So there can't be any gaps between the back brace and the back strip.
The bracing inside a guitar is still controversial to this day. In other words, there are builders that say the bracing doesn't affect anything. We believe that it does, because the bracing patterns that change the guitar in the body that it's in will change the dynamic range and change the tone.
So back in the early 30s, as we continued with this pursuit of innovation and sound that Orville left us, we started working on developing what first became the Jumbo in 1934. And then subsequently the advanced Jumbo in 1936. Now the differences were that the Jumbo had a regular scale of 24 3/4 and had what we were using up until then, which was our traditional bracing pattern. And then as we are looking to create a more stylized guitar, a more advanced instrument with bigger sound, we create the advanced Jumbo.
In our 1930s guitars, there's an X brace that holds the top. Most people know about the X brace. The width of that X, if you measure it in the original 1930s guitar, a typical guitar would be 95 degrees an X, a 95 degree X.
Here's where we change the bracing pattern, and that's why we call it a more advanced bracing pattern, where we widen it by about 5 degrees to create a larger projection of sound combined with a longer scale of 25.5. So this is a perfect example of how we were borrowing from that tradition that Orville was obsessed with in looking at ways to create new sounds, bigger sounds, and change the landscape to make the guitar be center stage with the artists.
Although they are called generically flat tops, our tops and our backs are not flat. There's reasoning for this, a reason why we do it. Now, in a nutshell, the way an acoustic guitar creates tone is every time you strike a note, it's microscopic, happens in a millisecond, but that top actually deflects, pushes the sound waves inside the guitar where the different woods, different shapes for different bodies, and different bracing patterns temper that tonality before it comes out of the guitar. The sound we want to get out of our Gibson acoustics dictates that we need to build them this way. And it's worked for over 100 years. And we just love that. The way that we create the dome top and back is some people think we carve that into the top like an arch top or like a mandolin. That's not the case. We have our braces created, and the side that's going to be glued to the top and back is actually not flat. In this case, this has a 28-foot radius to conform with the shape we want at the top. Back braces would have a 12-foot radius carved into the flat surface. What happens then is when you attach that top to those braces, it actually bends it over it. And that's what creates that tension that gives the Gibson that clarity, that pop, that in a lot of cases you cannot get from a non-arched topped guitar.
We've experimented a few years, actually a few decades ago, I should say, on flattening the top and putting a 90-degree neck joint on it. And when we listened to it, it was interesting. Same sound, beautiful sound, nice resonant wood, but there was more bass, but the mids dropped out. And we realized that the key element to the Gibson formula for something that the players have loved since the late 1920s is that mid-range. So that's why we dome the top, to gain that magic mid-range, the Gibson magic tone, as some people call it.
Historically, when you install braces on a top or a back, they would use spring bars, and they would put the top on a fixture with another fixture above it, and these spring bars would just be placed along the braces in various locations to hold it down. These days, we use a vacuum fixture, which is just wonderful. They'll have templates for a specific model, so they can only put the braces on that top and back at the exact right spot. For consistency's sake, they close the lid down, and it's a flexible membrane. They hit the switches, the vacuum sucks the air out, and we call it the seal meal. It kind of just sucks it down all the way around, but it's even, it's tight, and it's just a constant rotation all day long. And it just has made for a much better product since this technology has come into play.
The Gibson Acoustics that we started building in the 1990s were the first on the market for decades. The old ones were out for years and years and years and years, but they were missing for years and years and years. So they sounded warm, and they were all seasoned beautifully from the artists playing them for the decades. So when we started, we had a disadvantage. We had to make the new ones sound like the old ones.
Well, some of the braces we get are already hand-shaped. We still scallop off the ends of all our braces to get rid of as much wood where it's not needed as possible. So we have not only tooling, but hand scalloping happening in the factory just to get that Gibson sound we want and to make that guitar, again, as light and responsive as it can possibly be.
The braces on the backs and the tops get scalloped after we've set all the pieces. When we apply the glue, there's a time that we have come to an agreement on, which is 15 minutes. That allows the glue to dry the bracing under the bracing that we've applied. We're doing 3 at a time now, every 15 minutes.
We've talked about the dome top, the radius top. If you try to glue a radius top onto a flat edge of the rib, it's not going to hit parallel because it's going to come over at an angle. Plus the fact there's really not much room for glue on just the 95 thousandths thick rib set. So we install what's called kerfing. It's a single piece of mahogany. It's cut very thin so it's flexible. And what they will do is they will take this rib set, put it in a mold that holds the exact shape that we want the guitar to be finished at. They will then apply glue, clamp this kerfing in around top and back, both sides, let it sit, let it dry. At that point it comes out. It's still kind of rough. It's still not always exactly flush with the rib. So we have these sanders. They're 24-inch round sanding discs. They're not flat. One of them has a 28-foot parabolic dish. The other one has a 12-foot parabolic dish. So they'll set the whole fixture with the kerfing in the sanding fixture. It does a few things. It sands the guitar to the exact right finish taper from lower bout to upper bout, It sands the kerfing down flush with the rib, but more importantly, because that dish is a parabolic, it sands that edge at just the right angle for that 28-foot top to come get a parallel glue joint. And in the back, it'll be a 12-foot, which is a little bit steeper curve coming down. And once those are sanded, the ribs are ready to receive the top and back at that point. When we scallop the braces on the tops and backs, you can see some of the braces are scalloped off. Some continue all the way through to the edge. What we do next is a process called slotting for body build. They will take that top, set it on this rib set, and they'll mark with a pencil where those braces that did continue all the way to the edge are. At that point in time, they'll take a Dremel tool and do a little notch out. When that top goes back on, those braces key all the way through the kerfing and the rib to the edge.
Each one of these is like a snowflake. It's very similar, but it's completely different.
They'll apply the tops and backs to the rib set. We have very specific presses that are actually made with the arch cut into the presses to match the 28-foot radius top, the 12-foot radius back. Again, tight bond, great wood glue. This is what we use on this type of application. Put it in the presses, leave it in there for about 45 minutes. And at that point in time, though, there's a ton of cosmetic work to be done, clean up. Your body is basically finished at that point.
I look at myself in the mirror every morning when I'm going to come here to work, when I'm going to go to our crafteries, or when I'm traveling around the world working with our teams and with our artists. And I do feel that sense of being proud about what we're doing, but at the same time having this big responsibility that lies on my shoulders, and it lies on the shoulders of all of our teams around the world to carry forward the legacy that Orville started, and that for the last 130 years, we've received from all of the artists that have chosen Gibson guitars to record music, to play on stage, and to inspire fans around the world to do the same.